sweet peas and sugar dumplings. It's another touch story time with Shining Nathan. Now, you may have noticed I've been gone for a while, and well, that's not intended, but needed. As you know, 2 years ago, my mother passed away. It's almost her death anniversary, heavenly anniversary, or whatever. And I never really got to fully grieve. And I finally in Lisbon and all the move to Lisbon. And the last few months, it hit hard. The loss of my mother, my vanguard, my everything in the world. And add to the fact that I've never really truly experienced seasonal depression because I always got to see the sun. I guess that impacted the fact that I didn't see the sun for like 3 or 4 months. But since I've been safe in Lisbon, physically, I've been able to kind of let my shoulders down and feel what I lost 2 years ago. What I'd been going through for 3 prior to that. But anyway, I thank you for your time, and I'm going to give you into the story time. It is Everest by Isaac Asimov. And I'm glad to be back to give you a story time. So pause here to get your snacks, get acquainted, and get ready for a wonderful little sci-fi-esque science fiction by one of the kings of science fiction. Everest by Isaac Asimov. In 1952, they were about ready to give up trying to build Mount Everest. It was the photographs that kept them going. As photographs go, they weren't much. Fuzzy, streaked, and with dark blobs against the white to be interested in. But those dark blobs were living creatures. The men swore to it. I said, what the hell, they've been talking about creatures skinning along the Everest glaciers for 40 years. It's about time we did something about it. Jimmy Robbins, pardon me, James Abram Robbins, was the one who pushed me into that position. He was always nuts on mountain climbing, you see. He was the one who knew all about how the Tibetans wouldn't go near Everest because it was the mountain of the gods. He could quote me every mysterious man-like footprint ever reported in the ice 25,000 feet up. He knew by heart every tall story about the spindly white creatures speeding along the crags just over the last heartbreaking camp which the climbers had managed to establish. It's good to have one enthusiastic creature of the sort at Planetary Survey headquarters. The last photographs put bite into his words, though. After all, you might just barely think they were men. Jimmy said, "Look, boss, the point isn't that they're there. The point is that they move fast. Look at that figure. It's blurred. The camera might be moved. The crag here is sharp enough, and the men swear it was running. Imagine the metabolism must have to run at that oxygen pressure. Look, boss. Would you have believed in deep-sea fish if you never heard of them? You have fish which are looking for new niches in the environment which they can exploit, so they go deeper and deeper into the abyss until one day they find they can't return. They've adapted so thoroughly they can only live under tons of pressure. Well, damn it, can't you reverse the picture? Creatures can be forced up a mountain, can't they? They can learn to stick it out in thinner air and colder temperatures. They can live on moss or on occasional birds just as the deep-sea fish live in the last analysis live on the upper fauna that slowly get filtered down. Then someday they find they can't go down again. I don't even say they're men. They can be chamois or mountain goats or badgers or anything. I said stubbornly. The witnesses said they were vaguely manlike, and the reported footprints are certainly manlike. Or bear-like, said Jimmy. You can't tell. So that's when I said, it's about time we did something about it. Jimmy shrugged and said they've been trying to climb Mount Everest for 40 years, and he shook his head. For God's sakes, I said, all you mountain climbers are nuts, that's for sure. You're not interested in getting to the top. You're just interested in getting to the top in a certain way. It's about time we stop fooling around with picks, ropes, camps, and all the plethora of the gentleman's club that sends suckers up the slopes every 5 years or so. What are you getting at? They invented the airplane in 1903, you know. You mean fly over Mount Everest? He said in the way any English lord would say. Shoot a fox, or an angler would say, use worms. Yes, I said. Fly over Mount Everest and let someone down at the top. Why not? He wouldn't live long, the fellow you let down, I mean. Why not? You drop some supplies, an oxygen tank, and the fellow wears a spacesuit, naturally. It took time to get the Air Force to listen and to agree to send a plane, and by that time, Jimmy Robbins had swiveled his mind to the point where he volunteered to be the one to land on Everest Peak. After all, he said in a half of a whisper, I'd be the first man ever to stand there. That's the beginning of the story. The story itself can be told very simply and in far fewer words. The plane waited 2 weeks during the best part of the year, as far as Everest was concerned, that is, for a siege of only moderately nasty flying weather, then took off. They made it. The pilot reported by radio to a listening group exactly what the top of Mount Everest looked like when seen from above, and then he described exactly how Jimmy Robbins looked as he parachuted, got smaller and smaller. Then another blizzard broke, and the plane barely made it back to base, and it was another 2 weeks before the weather was bearable again. And all that time, Jimmy was on the roof of the world by himself, and I hated myself for a murderer. The plane went back up 2 weeks later to see if they could spot his body. I don't know what good it would have done if they had, but that's the human race for you. How many died in the last war? Who can count that high? But money or anything else is no object into saving of one life, or even the recovering of one body. They didn't find his body, but they did find a smoke signal, curled up in the thin air and whipping away in the gusts. They let down a grapple, and Jimmy came up, still in his spacesuit, looking like hell, but definitely alive. The P.S. to the story involves my visit to the hospital last week to see him. He's recovering very slowly. The doctors said shock. They said exhaustion, but Jimmy's eyes said a lot more. I said, how about it, Jimmy? You haven't talked to the reporters, you haven't talked to the government, all right? So how about you talk to me? I have nothing to say, he whispered. Sure you have, I said. You lived on top of Mount Everest during a 2-week blizzard. You didn't do that by yourself, not with all the supplies we dumped along with you. Who helped you, Jimmy boy? I guess he knew there was no use trying to bluff, or maybe he was anxious to get it off his mind. He said, they're intelligent, boss. They compressed air for me. They lit up a little power pack to keep me warm. They set up the smoke signal when they spotted the airplane coming back. I see. I didn't want to rush him. It's like we thought. They're adapted to Everest life. They can't go down the slopes. No, they can't, and we can't go up the slopes even if the weather didn't stop us. They would. They sound like kind of creatures, so why should they object? They helped you. They have nothing against us. They spoke to me, you know. Telepathy. I frowned. Well then, but they don't intend to be interfered with. They're watching us, boss. They've got to. We've got atomic power. We're about to have rocket ships. They're worried about us, and Everest is the only place they can watch us from. I frowned deeper. I was sweating and his hands were shaking. I said, easy, boy, and take it easy. What on earth are those creatures? And he said, what do you suppose would be so adapted to thin air and sub-zero cold that Everest would be the only livable place on Earth for them to live? That's the whole point. They're nothing at all on Earth. They're Martians. And And that's it. A simple tale, a slight science fiction by one of the kings and originators of science fiction. I hope you enjoyed this storytelling of Everest by Isaac Asimov. He has a lot of little known works and I enjoy bringing them to you. And I'm looking at expanding the content I have on this platform and actually move forward to doing my Mr. Rogers for Adults. Have a little segment where I introduce new things to you, teach you some things, and then have guest speakers. I think that'd be lovely. While continuing to do story time. If you enjoyed this content, please consider subscribing to my Patreon for as low as $3 a month, because that is my main source of income. As always, I love you. And special thank you to all my patrons that have stuck it out with me during my hiatus. You really are special to me, and thank you so much.